You wake up, and before you even open your eyes, your mind is already working. One thought pulls another. A worry appears without asking permission. A strange sensation moves through your body for no clear reason. And before you realize it, you're already reacting, not choosing, not deciding, just reacting. You go through the day believing you're in control. But something feels off. Why do you react the same way in completely different situations, even after promising yourself, next time will be different? Why do certain emotions hit so hard, even when you know, rationally, that they don't make sense? Why do you understand what you should do, but still can't seem to do it? Maybe the pain you feel isn't a lack of discipline, or motivation, or willpower. Maybe it's something deeper and invisible. Here's the uncomfortable truth: most of your mental life happens before you're aware that anything happened at all. Your brain evaluates, decides, reacts, and interprets reality in milliseconds, and only afterward does it hand you a finished story called a conscious thought. You feel like you chose. But most of the time, you simply agreed with a decision that was already made. And that's where inner conflict is born. You blame yourself for repeating patterns. You judge yourself for feeling what you feel. You get frustrated for not changing. But no one ever told you that the problem isn't your will, it's the architecture of your mind. Imagine driving a car, convinced your hands are on the wheel, when the autopilot has been running the system for years. That's how mental patterns work. They're built from repetition, emotional learning, past experiences, and survival mechanisms. They're fast, efficient, silent. And precisely because of that, they're hard to see. So let me ask you something honestly. How many of your reactions are actual choices? How many of your decisions come from habit, fear, or conditioning, rather than awareness? How many beliefs about yourself have never been truly examined? Most people never stop to realize this, but the mind doesn't resist change because change is bad. It resists because the unfamiliar isn't mapped yet. And anything unmapped feels dangerous to a brain designed to minimize risk. But there is a way forward. And it doesn't begin with motivational quotes. It doesn't start with forcing positive thoughts. It doesn't rely on sheer willpower. It starts with something far simpler, and far more powerful: understanding. When you understand how the mind actually works, something shifts. You stop fighting your thoughts and start observing them. You stop confusing yourself with your emotions and begin recognizing them. You stop judging yourself for repeating patterns and start seeing why they exist. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. In this video, you won't get empty advice. You'll experience how your mind truly operates, why it behaves the way it does, and how awareness interrupts the automatic process, not to turn you into someone else, but to give back a sense of control you thought you already had. So, I leave you with one last question: what if what you call who I am is just a collection of patterns that have never been questioned? What if your mental freedom begins the moment you learn to observe, instead of reacting? If you are willing to look inside honestly, this video could forever change how you understand yourselves. And if this perspective is already making sense, consider continuing this investigation with me and becoming part of our community by liking and subscribing to the channel. Let's continue. Not as a habit, but as a signal that you're choosing awareness over autopilot. Now, let's go deeper. Most people believe they are consciously making decisions all day long. They think they choose how to react, what to feel, what to think. But neuroscience tells a different story. In studies conducted in American universities over the last decades, researchers discovered something unsettling: the brain often initiates decisions before you become aware of them. By the time you think, "I decided this," your nervous system has already acted. This doesn't mean you don't have free will. It means your free will operates inside a system that's already running. That system is the mental autopilot. Think about how often you do things without thinking. Driving the same route home. Checking your phone without intention. Responding emotionally before logic even has time to arrive. Now apply that same principle to your inner life. Your reactions, your emotional responses, your self-talk, your fears, your impulses, they don't appear randomly. They follow paths. The brain is designed for efficiency, not truth. It's constantly asking one question: what's the fastest way to respond based on past experience? And the answer is almost always, do what worked before. That's how the autopilot is built. Every time an emotional response repeats, the neural pathway strengthens. Every time a belief goes unquestioned, it becomes familiar. Every time a reaction protects you from discomfort, the brain marks it as useful. Over time, these patterns stop feeling like habits and start feeling like who you are. But they're not identity. They're conditioning. This is why you can intellectually understand something and still feel stuck. Why insight alone doesn't always change behavior. Why saying, "I know better," doesn't stop the reaction. Because knowledge lives in consciousness. Conditioning lives in the nervous system. And the nervous system moves faster. So when something triggers you, a tone of voice, a look, a memory, a feeling, your body reacts before your mind explains. Tension appears. Defensiveness rises. Anxiety tightens your chest. Anger flares. Shame pulls you inward. And only after that do thoughts arrive to justify the reaction. This is why people say things like, "I don't know why I reacted like that. It just happened. I wasn't even thinking." They're telling the truth. The autopilot had control. What makes this difficult to accept is that the autopilot isn't malicious. It doesn't exist to sabotage you. It exists to protect you. At some point in your life, these reactions served a purpose. They helped you adapt. They helped you survive emotionally. They helped you avoid pain, rejection, or danger. But the brain doesn't update itself automatically. It keeps using old maps even when the territory has changed. That's why adult lives are often run by childhood strategies. Why grown people still react from places that no longer exist. Why emotional responses feel outdated but powerful. The autopilot doesn't ask if a response is appropriate. It only checks if it's familiar. And familiarity feels safe. This is the illusion of control. You feel like you're choosing, but most of the time, you're selecting from a limited menu of conditioned responses. And until those responses are seen clearly, they remain invisible drivers of your life. Here's the crucial shift: the moment you notice the autopilot, it begins to lose power. Not because you fought it. Not because you suppressed it. But because awareness interrupts automation. You don't stop the autopilot by force. You stop it by observing it. The simple act of noticing creates a gap. And inside that gap, something new becomes possible. This is why awareness is not passive. It's transformative. Once you see that your reactions are patterns, not truths, not commands, not destiny, you stop identifying with them. You begin to ask different questions. Where did this come from? What is this protecting me from? Is this response still necessary? Those questions don't destroy the autopilot. They expose it. And exposure is the first step toward change. Because what runs unconsciously feels inevitable. But what becomes conscious becomes optional. And that realization changes everything. In the next part, we're going to explore how these patterns are built into actual neural circuits, why repetition strengthens them, and how the brain's own plasticity allows them to be reshaped. Not through force. Not through motivation. But through understanding how the system truly works. That's where real transformation begins. Before we continue, a quick note: if this exploration of the mind feels meaningful to you, you're welcome to subscribe and leave a like. Not out of habit, but as a quiet way of saying, I'm choosing to look deeper. Now, let's go deeper. Everything the mind does repeatedly, it learns to do automatically. This is not philosophy. It's biology. Inside your brain, every experience leaves a trace. Not a memory in the poetic sense, but a physical change. A strengthening of connections between neurons that fire together again and again. At first, the signal is faint. A single thought. A single emotional reaction. A single way of responding to a situation. But repetition changes everything. Imagine walking through an open field for the first time. Your steps barely mark the ground. But walk the same path every day, and a trail appears. Walk it for years, and it becomes a road. Eventually, it turns into a highway, the easiest, fastest route to take. That is how conditioned circuits are formed. The brain doesn't choose the best path. It chooses the most familiar one. This is why emotional patterns feel so convincing. Why reactions arise before logic. Why certain thoughts return no matter how much you try to replace them. Those reactions aren't random. They're the result of circuits that have been reinforced through repetition. And here's the part most people never realize: your brain doesn't care if a circuit makes you happy. It only cares if it's efficient. If a certain response once reduced fear, avoided rejection, or helped you adapt, the brain labeled it as useful. Even if that response now creates anxiety. Even if it sabotages relationships. Even if it keeps you stuck. Efficiency comes before well-being. This is why people return to the same emotional loops. Overthinking, self-doubt, people-pleasing, emotional withdrawal, explosive reactions, chronic tension, not because they want to, but because the neural pathway is already paved. And the brain will always take the paved road. This is where repetition becomes dangerous, but also powerful. Because repetition doesn't just build circuits. It can reshape them. This ability of the brain to change its wiring is known as neuroplasticity, a concept widely studied and accepted in modern American neuroscience. For a long time, scientists believed the adult brain was fixed. That once patterns were formed, they were permanent. We now know that's not true. The brain remains plastic throughout life. It adapts, reorganizes, and rewires itself in response to experience. But there's a catch. Neuroplasticity doesn't respond to intention alone. It responds to repetition with awareness. This is why simply understanding a pattern rarely changes it. Insight without repetition fades. Awareness without practice weakens. A circuit isn't dismantled because you recognized it once. It weakens when it stops being reinforced. And that only happens when awareness interrupts repetition. Each time you notice a reaction before acting on it, you step off the old highway. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Unnatural. Slow. The brain resists because it prefers what it knows. But every moment of conscious interruption lays down a new path. A weaker signal at first. A fragile trail. And this is where most people give up, because the new path doesn't feel natural yet. But that discomfort is not failure. It's rewiring. Over time, with consistent awareness, the new path strengthens. The old one fades. Not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped feeding it. This is the hidden truth of change: what you stop repeating, the brain stops prioritizing. Neuroplasticity is not dramatic. It's quiet, incremental, almost invisible in the moment. But over time, it reshapes your inner world. Reactions soften. Thoughts slow down. Space appears between impulse and action. And inside that space, choice emerges. This is why awareness is so powerful. Not because it fixes everything instantly, but because it changes what gets repeated. You don't rewire the mind by force. You rewire it by noticing. And that realization marks a turning point. Because once you understand that your patterns are learned, you stop treating them as identity. You stop saying, "This is who I am," and start saying, "This is what I learned." And what was learned can be unlearned. In the next part, we'll move even deeper into the symbolic language of the unconscious, where desires, fantasies, and inner images reveal what these circuits are really trying to protect. That's where the mind speaks without words. And that's where understanding becomes integration. I extend a discreet invitation: if this type of reflection resonates with you, feel free to like or subscribe. Not as a habit, but as a small sign that these internal conversations are important to you. Let's continue. There is a part of the human mind that doesn't speak in words. It doesn't explain. It doesn't argue. It shows. This is the language of the unconscious. And one of the clearest ways it communicates is through fantasies, inner images, imagined scenarios, recurring desires, symbolic stories that arise when the conscious mind relaxes its control. In American culture, fantasies are often misunderstood. They're reduced to entertainment, impulse, or something to be suppressed or judged. But in depth psychology, fantasies are neither commands nor flaws. They are messages. The unconscious doesn't care about social rules, morality, or logic. It cares about balance. When something in your conscious life is ignored, restricted, or denied, the unconscious compensates by creating symbolic images that express what's missing. That's why fantasies often feel exaggerated, intense, or strange. They're not meant to be literal. They're meant to be noticed. Carl Jung described this as the psyche's natural self-regulating function. When one side of the personality dominates, the unconscious pushes back, not to sabotage you, but to restore wholeness. A fantasy of power, for example, rarely means a desire to dominate others. More often, it points to a life where your voice was minimized, your agency suppressed, or your strength discouraged. A fantasy of surrender doesn't mean weakness. It may reveal exhaustion, a longing to finally stop controlling everything. A fantasy of being seen, desired, or chosen often has little to do with romance. It can emerge from years of invisibility, emotional neglect, or feeling fundamentally misunderstood. These images are not instructions. They are symbols. And symbols speak in emotional truth. The problem begins when people judge their fantasies instead of listening to them. Judgment creates repression. Repression creates fragmentation. When a part of you is pushed away, it doesn't disappear. It goes underground. And what is buried doesn't stay quiet. It expresses itself through tension, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, compulsive behavior, or sudden emotional reactions. This is why ignoring fantasies doesn't bring peace. Understanding them does. To understand a fantasy, you don't ask, "Should I act on this?" You ask, "What feeling is this pointing to? What part of me wants expression? What imbalance is this trying to correct?" When approached this way, fantasies stop being threats. They become maps. Maps of unmet needs. Maps of disowned emotions. Maps of unlived parts of the self. This is where integration begins. Integration doesn't mean indulging every impulse. It means acknowledging the truth behind it. For example, When someone recognizes that their fantasy of intensity reflects a life lived in emotional restraint, they can begin to introduce vitality in healthy ways, creativity, movement, honest expression. When someone understands that their fantasy of escape reflects chronic pressure, they can address the pressure itself instead of numbing it. The fantasy dissolves not because it was suppressed, but because its message was received. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of psychological growth. What you listen to transforms. What you judge persists. Fantasies lose their grip when they're integrated into consciousness. And this integration creates a shift that's subtle but profound. You stop being controlled by inner images. You stop fearing your own mind. You stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. Instead, you begin to feel whole. The unconscious was never trying to confuse you. It was trying to communicate. And when you learn its language, the relationship with yourself changes. Curiosity replaces fear. Understanding replaces shame. Presence replaces repression. In the next and final part, we'll bring everything together, conditioning, awareness, circuits, and symbols, into the process of integration. Not fixing yourself. Not becoming someone else. But reclaiming what was always yours. That's where the journey becomes embodied. And where insight turns into freedom. If you've identified with this series so far, feel free to like or subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a gentle way of saying, this journey is important to me. Continuing. For most of your life, you've been taught to divide yourself. Certain emotions were labeled good. Others were labeled bad. Some traits were praised. Others were discouraged, ignored, or punished. So you learned to edit yourself. You kept the parts that were accepted. And you pushed the rest into the shadows. This is how the shadow is formed. The shadow is not the worst part of you. It's the unlived part. The parts that had no safe place to exist. Anger that was never allowed. Grief that was never expressed. Desire that felt inappropriate. Sensitivity that felt unsafe. Strength that was misunderstood. Vulnerability that felt dangerous. None of these parts are evil. They are incomplete. And what remains incomplete doesn't disappear. It shapes your life from behind the scenes. This is why people feel divided inside. Why there's an ongoing inner conflict. Why you can want change and resist it at the same time. Why growth feels exhausting instead of liberating. You're not fighting against yourself. You're fighting parts of yourself. Integration is the moment that fight ends. Not because the shadow is eliminated, but because it's finally acknowledged. In Jungian psychology, integration means allowing disowned parts of the psyche to return to consciousness, not to dominate, but to be understood. And understanding changes everything. When you stop judging your shadow, it stops sabotaging you. When you stop fearing certain emotions, they stop controlling you. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, they stop demanding attention through symptoms. The shadow doesn't want power. It wants recognition. This is one of the deepest paradoxes of psychological healing: what you resist persists. What you understand integrates. Becoming whole is not about fixing flaws. It's about restoring connection. You don't become whole by becoming perfect. You become whole by becoming honest. Honest about your fears. Your desires. Your contradictions. Your wounds. Your complexity. Wholeness is not purity. It's inclusion. When you integrate the shadow, something subtle shifts. You stop overreacting. You stop projecting. You stop being triggered so easily. You stop needing the world to be different so you can feel okay. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing inside you is being exiled anymore. This is what inner freedom feels like. There is no longer a constant effort to control yourself. No constant self-monitoring. No ongoing internal debate. There is space. And in that space, choice appears. You begin responding instead of reacting. You begin expressing instead of suppressing. You begin listening instead of fighting. The mind that once felt like a battlefield begins to feel like a home. Not because everything is resolved, but because everything belongs. This is the essence of becoming whole. It's not a dramatic transformation. It's a quiet reconciliation. A moment when you realize you no longer need to run from yourself. When you stop searching for completion outside. When you recognize that nothing inside you needs to be eliminated, only understood. And that understanding changes the way you live. Your relationships soften. Your decisions become clearer. Your energy returns. Your sense of self stabilizes. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer divided. If this final part resonated with you, if something inside you feels calmer or clearer right now, you're welcome to leave a like or subscribe. Not as a transaction, but as a sign that you're choosing this path of awareness and integration. This is not the end of a process. It's the beginning of a different relationship with yourself. One where nothing needs to be hidden. Nothing needs to be forced. And nothing needs to be rejected. Only understood. And when that happens, you don't just change. You come home. Until the next video.